Thanks for the upgrade, honey, Leo said with a grin as he waltzed into the living room, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. He stood there oozing confidence in his custom-made suit and brand-new gleaming shoes, his expensive luggage practically screaming designer labels. First class to Europe fancy hotels. This is the life I've been missing out on, Clara. I couldn't help myself. I just burst out laughing. What's so funny? He snapped, his eyebrows furrowing. Meanwhile, I was the one who actually made those dreams a reality, holding down a stable career while he jumped from one half-baked get-rich-quick scheme to the next. I ignored all the glaring warning signs, the shady financial dealings, the never-ending excuses for his lack of income, because I desperately wanted to believe that we were a team, a partnership. But last week at 2 a.m., Leo made a critical mistake, one that he couldn't just charm his way out of with a dazzling smile and a wink. I'd been sound asleep upstairs when it all went down. He must have waited until he was absolutely positive that I was out cold before sneaking down to my laptop. My line of work in cybersecurity had taught me to always be on the lookout for potential scams and schemes, but I never in a million years thought I'd need to use those skills at home within my own marriage. That night, Leo used my laptop to access one of my credit cards, copying down all the important details, snapping a few quick photos with his phone, and then slinking back into bed as if nothing had happened at all. The very next morning, while I was casually sipping my coffee, I noticed a ridiculous flood of alerts blowing up my phone. I quickly opened my banking app and discovered nearly $50,000 worth of fraudulent charges, designer clothes, ridiculously expensive watches, first-class plane tickets to Rome. My stomach dropped like a stone as all the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Leo was behind this, of course he was. But instead of panicking or freaking out, I just smiled. You see, the card he'd used wasn't a personal account. It was a dummy credit card linked to a training program that I run at work. It's designed to teach companies how to spot and respond to fraudulent activity. Every single transaction triggers an automatic alert that goes directly to the authorities. Leo had absolutely no clue that he'd just turned himself into a real-life case study. I called my lawyer Tessa that same morning. "You are absolutely not going to believe this," I told her, recounting every single detail of the situation. She didn't even try to hold back her laughter. Wait, let me make sure I've got this straight," she said between chuckles. "He stole a dummy card, the one that's literally designed to detect fraud." "Exactly," I said. My voice calm as can be, but definitely edged with a hint of satisfaction. I really don't think he had any idea what he was doing. He probably thought he was being incredibly clever and getting away with something. "Clever," Tessa said incredulously. "He's a complete idiot. Every single charge he makes is going to get flagged immediately." "Have the authorities contacted you yet?" "Not yet, but it's only a matter of time before they do." For the rest of the week, I decided to keep my mouth shut and just watch, waiting to see how far Leo would actually take this ridiculous charade. He left a short note on the kitchen counter a couple of days later. "Taking some time for myself. Don't wait up." I knew exactly what that meant. He was using my stolen money to live it up in style overseas. Every single night I watched the fraud alerts pouring in high-end restaurants, five-star hotels, extravagant shopping sprees. Each notification felt like a small personal victory. 3 days into his spending spree, I got a call from Agent Decker, a federal investigator who had been assigned to the case. "We've identified a significant amount of fraudulent activity tied to your account," he said, his voice professional. "Do you have any idea who might be responsible for this?" "Yes," I replied, without even a moment's hesitation. "My husband is the one responsible. There was a brief, awkward pause. Your husband, I quickly explained the entire situation, including the crucial detail that the credit card was actually part of a cybersecurity program. He sauntered into the living room like absolutely nothing had happened, practically dripping in the spoils of his stolen spending spree. "Thanks for the upgrade, babe," he said with a cocky, self-satisfied grin. "You really outdid yourself this time, you know." I simply couldn't stop the laughter that bubbled up and burst out of me. Leo frowned, clearly expecting me to be absolutely furious and ready to explode. "What's so funny?" he asked, his voice taking on a sharp, accusatory tone. "Oh, Leo," I said, shaking my head with a mixture of amusement and pity. "You're about to find out exactly what's so funny." Leo casually dropped his designer duffel bag onto the floor with a smug thud. "Seriously though, Clara," he said, shrugging off his tailored jacket and draping it over the back of the couch like he was some kind of movie star. "You really should have told me about that credit card ages ago, you know. Imagine how much fun we could have had if you'd just loosened up a little." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms and raising an eyebrow. "And how exactly did you think all of this was going to end, Leo?" He smirked, kicking off his brand new shoes and wiggling his toes. "You're always so uptight and worried about money, Clara. It's not like you couldn't afford it. I just figured you'd eventually get over it once you saw how happy it made me." His sheer audacity would have been absolutely infuriating if it weren't also so pathetic at the same time. I bit back a laugh, knowing that every single second he spent bragging and boasting was another nail in his own coffin. So all the watches, the first-class flights, the fancy hotels, you seriously thought all of that was just a gift from me? "Not thought," he said, pointing directly at himself with a dramatic flourish. "Knew it. It's about time you learned to loosen up a little and actually enjoy your life." I smiled, a tight-lipped expression that told him absolutely nothing about what I was really thinking or feeling. I'll bet. Once Leo disappeared into the shower, humming some ridiculously obnoxious tune that was clearly off-key, I immediately picked up my phone and texted Tessa. "He's back, ready to move forward with the plan." Her reply was instantaneous. "Perfect. I'll alert Agent Decker immediately." Over the course of the past week, Tessa and Agent Decker had been meticulously preparing the case against Leo, documenting his every move and meticulously logging every single charge he'd made on the fraudulent credit card. From the expensive designer clothing boutiques to the ultra-luxurious hotels in Rome, his unrestrained indulgence painted a clear picture of someone who genuinely believed they were completely untouchable, that they were above the barrière law. Leo had absolutely no idea just how deep of a grave he'd actually dug for himself. Agent Decker had assured me that the continuous stream of fraud alerts coming from the dummy account had already triggered a full-blown federal investigation. "We'll bring him in for questioning the moment you're ready," he'd said during our last phone call. "But I'd strongly recommend letting him walk right into it on his own, thinking he's getting away with something. The more confident he is, the better it will be for the case." Now, as I listened to Leo's off-key singing echoing loudly from the bathroom, I felt an almost surreal sense of calm wash over me. For years, I'd allowed him to take advantage of my trust, my kindness, my financial stability. But this time, he was finally about to face the serious consequences of grossly underestimating me. After Leo emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a plush towel and grinning like he didn't have a single care in the world, he casually flopped onto the couch. "You absolutely should have seen Rome," he said, reaching into his designer bag to pull out a shiny, gaudy gold watch. "The shops, the restaurants. It was seriously like living in a dream." "Sounds absolutely incredible," I said, leaning against the doorway and trying to sound genuinely interested. "Tell me more about your trip." He immediately launched into a detailed account of his week-long spending spree. complete with exaggerated hand gestures and unnecessary details about the specific brand of champagne he'd been drinking at some fancy rooftop bar. Every single word he uttered felt like a formal indictment, a confession he didn't even realize he was making. He had absolutely no idea that I was recording the entire conversation on my phone, the file ready to be forwarded to Agent Decker as soon as he was done talking. And the absolute best part of the whole thing, Leo said, holding up the gold watch to admire it, is that nobody suspected a thing. Not even you, Clara. The very next morning, Tessa and I met over coffee at our favorite cafe to finalize the timeline of events and make sure everything was in order. He literally has no defense whatsoever, she said, scrolling through all the evidence we'd compiled against him. The continuous fraud alerts, the detailed list of charges, the recording of his incriminating conversation from last night. It's airtight, Clara. Agent Decker is completely ready to bring him in for questioning. They're currently coordinating with the local police department to execute the arrest. I nodded slowly, the immense weight of everything that had happened finally starting to settle in and sink in. So what exactly happens after that point? He'll be facing multiple serious charges, including fraud, identity theft, and the unauthorized use of a financial account, Tessa explained matter-of-factly. Given the sheer amount of money involved in the case, this definitely won't just be a slap on the wrist. In the best-case scenario for him, he cuts a deal with the prosecution and manages to avoid any actual jail time. In the worst-case scenario, he's potentially looking at years behind bars. A small part of me actually wanted to feel a little bit sorry for him, but then I quickly remembered the smug grin on his face, the way he'd flaunted his stolen goods without even a second thought about the immense damage he was causing. This wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a deeply ingrained pattern of selfishness, entitlement, and complete disregard for others that I had somehow managed to be completely blind to for far too long. Later that evening, as Leo lounged lazily on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through his phone, I heard the unmistakable sound of a firm knock at the front door. My heart immediately started racing, not with fear or anxiety, but with a strange sense of anticipation and excitement. I walked purposefully to the door and opened it to reveal Agent Decker and two uniformed police officers standing on the front porch. "Good evening, Miss Hayes," Decker said, his tone professional but also surprisingly warm and reassuring. "Is Leo currently at home?" "Yes, he's right inside the house," I said, stepping aside to allow them entry. "Please feel free to make yourselves comfortable." Leo looked up from his phone, his brows furrowing together in confusion as he tried to figure out what was happening. "What's going on here?" he asked, sitting up straighter on the couch. Agent Decker approached him with a calm authority that seemed to instantly make the entire living room feel smaller and more confined. "Leo Hayes, you're currently under investigation for multiple counts of credit card fraud and the unauthorized use of financial accounts. We'd like you to come with us to the station for questioning." Leo's face immediately went completely pale, his carefully constructed facade of confidence evaporating in an instant. "What? No, there must be some kind of mistake," he stammered, looking desperately to me for support and reassurance. "Clara, tell them this is absolutely crazy." I crossed my arms, casually tilting my head slightly to the side as I observed the scene unfolding before me. "I really don't know, Leo. You've certainly been awfully busy lately. Maybe you should try explaining everything to them." As the police officers began reading him his Miranda rights and led him toward the door, Leo continued to loudly protest his innocence. "You can't do this to me, Clara. This is a complete setup. You're my wife. Aren't you supposed to stand by me, support me, no matter what?" "Funny," I said, leaning against the doorway with a sardonic smile. "I was always under the impression that husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning something new and valuable today." Leo glared at me with pure hatred, his bravado completely replaced by a look of utter desperation. "You absolutely won't get away with this, Clara," I smiled sweetly. "Oh, Leo, I already have." The door clicked shut with a sharp, decisive sound as the police officers escorted Leo out of the apartment, leaving the living room eerily silent and empty. I stood there for a moment, staring at the vacant space where he'd been standing just minutes ago, trying to process everything that had just happened. My heart was still racing, not from any sense of fear or regret, but from the sheer weight of the monumental moment. He was finally gone. Finally and undeniably gone from my life. But this wasn't quite over yet. Not just yet. About an hour later, Tessa called me on my cell phone. "He's with Agent Decker at the station now," she said, her voice calm but also firm and determined. "They've already started questioning him about the fraud charges. From what Decker has told me so far, Leo is already trying to spin the entire story in his favor, attempting to manipulate the situation." "Of course he is," I said, rolling my eyes at the predictable nature of his behavior. "Let me guess. He's playing the victim card, trying to paint himself as some kind of innocent pawn." "You're absolutely spot on," Tessa replied with a dry laugh. "He's claiming that you gave him explicit permission to use the credit card, that it was all one big misunderstanding. But don't worry about it for a second, Clara. Between the continuous fraud alerts, the itemized list of charges, and your own recording of his incriminating confession, he really doesn't stand even the slightest chance of getting away with this." The next morning, Agent Decker called me with a formal update on the case. "We've got everything that we need in order to move forward," he said, his voice sounding confident and assured. "Your husband, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, has officially admitted to using the credit card, but he continues to insist that he had absolutely no knowledge that it was actually tied to a fraud detection program. He's still trying to place the blame for the entire mix-up squarely on you, claiming that you somehow misled him." "That definitely sounds about right for him," I said, leaning back comfortably in my office chair. "So what exactly happens next in the legal process?" "We're moving forward with filing all of the relevant criminal charges," Decker explained to me in detail. "He's officially facing multiple counts of fraud and the unauthorized use of a financial account. Given the substantial amount of money that was involved in his illegal activities, he'll most likely be looking at some significant and serious consequences for his actions. The various buyer protection programs have already flagged all of his luxury purchases as fraudulent, so those charges are currently being reimbursed to the original account. You are absolutely not liable for even a single cent of his fraudulent spending." The immense sense of relief that I felt at that moment was both immediate and completely overwhelming. For days I had been carrying the heavy weight of Leo's incredibly irresponsible and illegal actions, constantly worrying that he might somehow manage to slip through the cracks and avoid being held accountable for what he had done. But now, hearing the genuine confidence in Agent Decker's voice, I finally began to fully realize the true extent of my victory in this whole situation. "Thank you so much," I said to him, my voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for absolutely everything that you've done for me on this case." "There's really no need to thank me personally," Decker replied modestly. "This case practically handed itself to us on a silver platter. You're the one who truly handled everything brilliantly from the very beginning, Clara." The resulting fallout from Leo's arrest hit him much harder than I had ever actually anticipated. Word quickly spread like wildfire among our mutual friends and acquaintances about his arrest and the serious fraud charges he was facing. And it wasn't very long before his carefully crafted public image as the charming, carefree husband began to completely crumble and fall apart. Jessica, the woman who I had strongly suspected he'd been carrying on an affair with behind my back, apparently dumped him the very moment she heard about the fraud charges and the fact that he was potentially facing serious jail time. The ridiculously expensive designer goods that he had flaunted so ostentatiously were all immediately confiscated by the authorities. The luxurious first-class flights he had booked were canceled without any refunds, and all of his various bank accounts were frozen solid. One evening I received a phone call from an unfamiliar phone number. Against my better judgment and my well-honed instincts, I decided to answer the call anyway, and sure enough, it was Leo on the other end of the line. "Clara," he began hesitantly, his voice sounding both low and completely drained of any energy. I really need to talk to you about everything that's happened." I couldn't help but let out a short, derisive laugh. "Leo, the only thing you actually need to be doing right now is figuring out exactly how you're going to adequately explain your extremely illegal actions to the judge at your upcoming trial." "Please, Clara," he said, his tone quickly shifting from polite to increasingly desperate. "I messed everything up, okay? I truly didn't mean for any of this to actually go this far, I swear. I was just what exactly?" I interrupted him sharply, my voice as cold as ice. "Just trying to steal $50,000 from me without my knowledge or permission. Just hoping that I wouldn't actually notice what you were doing behind my back. Just banking on the false assumption that I was far too blind or far too forgiving to actually take any steps to stop you from defrauding me." There was a long, awkward silence on the other end of the phone line. Finally, he muttered under his breath, "I genuinely thought that you truly loved me, Clara." I let out a sharp breath, my pent-up anger finally boiling over and reaching its breaking point. "I did love you, Leo. I truly loved the person that I honestly thought you were deep down. But the person who stole from me, who lied to me repeatedly, who actually thought he could get away with defrauding me, that's not someone that I could ever possibly love or respect." Before he could even attempt to respond to my emotional outburst, I immediately hung up the phone on him. A week later, Tessa called me to confirm that Leo had officially accepted a plea deal with the prosecution. "He's managed to avoid actually serving any jail time," she explained in detail, "but he'll be legally required to pay back every single cent that he attempted to steal from you, and he'll also have to complete a lengthy term of community service. Plus, his credit score is going to be in complete shambles for many years to come." "That actually sounds perfectly fitting and appropriate," I said, smiling to myself slightly. He always desperately wanted to live the high life of luxury and wealth. Now he's finally going to get to experience exactly how the other half actually lives. Tessa laughed loudly. "You are definitely handling this whole situation far better than most people ever would, Clara." "It's actually quite funny," I said, smiling to myself. For years, I mistakenly believed that Leo was actually the one who was holding everything together in our marriage. I thought that his seemingly endless charm, his supposed ambition, his so-called big ideas, were the key ingredients that were keeping us moving forward in life. But now I finally see everything crystal clearly. I was actually the one who was holding everything up and keeping it all afloat. He was simply dead weight that was holding me back from actually achieving my full potential in life. The very day that the official divorce papers finally came through in the mail, I poured myself a large glass of my very favorite red wine and sat down on the comfortable couch in my living room, looking carefully around the beautiful apartment that now felt completely and wholly mine alone. Leo's absence in my life wasn't actually a personal loss at all. It was a true gift, a golden opportunity for me to finally rebuild my entire life from the ground up, free from the constant shadow of his intense selfishness. As I slowly sipped my delicious wine, I couldn't help but think back to the moment when he had first walked through the front door, flaunting his expensive stolen goods and mockingly thanking me for the supposed upgrade that he had given himself by defrauding me. He had been so incredibly confident in that moment, so completely sure of his own brilliance and his ability to manipulate me. And now he was finally the one who was truly paying the ultimate price for his egregious actions. For the first time in many years, I felt completely and utterly free. This wasn't simply the unfortunate end of a failed marriage. It was actually the exciting beginning of a brand new life that I could finally call my very own. The entire apartment felt eerily quiet and peaceful in the days immediately following Leo's arrest. His personal belongings were all gone now, what little he hadn't already sold off or stuffed into his expensive designer duffel bag. But the physical space of the apartment felt noticeably lighter and more open, almost as if the emotional weight of his years of betrayal had been physically lifted off of my shoulders. For the first time in many years, I could comfortably sit in my own home without constantly feeling his dark shadow looming menacingly over me. Tessa even stopped by one afternoon to drop off some final legal paperwork. "So, how are you actually holding up through all of this?" she asked me, sitting down comfortably on the couch with her usual, no-nonsense demeanor. "Actually, I'm doing much better than I ever thought I would be," I admitted honestly, handing her a steaming cup of freshly brewed coffee. "It's kind of strange to say out loud, but I don't even feel particularly angry about everything that happened anymore. I just mostly feel incredibly relieved that it's all finally over." She smiled knowingly. "That's probably because you've already truly won in this entire situation. You didn't simply survive through this incredibly difficult ordeal, Clara. You actually came out of it even stronger and more self-assured than you ever were before." I thought carefully about that possibility as we went through all the final legal documents together, carefully finalizing all of the details regarding Leo's required financial restitution. It wasn't simply about the money, although knowing that he would eventually be required to pay back every single cent that he had fraudulently stolen from me was definitely incredibly satisfying. It was ultimately about finally reclaiming my complete and total independence from him. For many years, I had allowed Leo to dictate the various terms of our unequal relationship, mistakenly thinking that it would be easier in the long run to simply keep the peace and avoid any unnecessary conflicts. But now I finally realized that peace, which is built upon constant compromises and stifled silence, wasn't really genuine peace at all. The official letter of divorce finally arrived in the mail approximately 1 week later, delivered in an unassuming white envelope that felt far too small and insignificant to adequately contain something as monumental as the legal dissolution of my marriage. I carefully held the envelope in my hands for a brief moment, allowing the full weight of its contents to truly sink in before carefully tearing it open. My eyes scanned the dense lines of formal legal jargon until I finally located the crucial words that truly mattered the most: finalized and irrevocable. I immediately sat down at the kitchen table, the official letter still resting in my hands, and allowed myself a rare moment of quiet reflection on everything that I had been through. This definitely wasn't at all the kind of picture-perfect life that I had naively imagined for myself when I had first married Leo. I had originally envisioned a life filled with mutual stability, genuine partnership, and a shared future that was firmly built upon mutual respect and trust. But now, as I looked carefully around the comfortable home that I had painstakingly rebuilt for myself, I finally realized that I actually had something even better than all of that: true freedom, personal clarity, and a deep, unwavering knowledge that I was far stronger than I had ever given myself true credit for. Sophie came over to my apartment that very evening, armed with a bottle of my favorite wine and a carton of my very favorite takeout food. "To brand new and exciting beginnings," she said, raising her wine glass high into the air. "And also to the absolute dumpster fire of a marriage that you somehow just managed to successfully walk away from entirely unscathed." I laughed heartily, clinking my glass enthusiastically against hers. "To never settling for anything less than what I know that I truly deserve in this life." Over the course of the next few weeks, I gradually started to consciously piece together exactly what my exciting new life was actually going to look like, without Leo constantly weighing me down. I completely redecorated my apartment, adding new splashes of bright color and fun, personal touches that felt uniquely and authentically me. I finally booked and took the solo vacation that I had been dreaming about for many years, spending my precious free time exploring the beautiful coastline and soaking in the kind of profound peace that only comes from deliberately leaving everything behind for a little while. Leo actually tried to reach out to me a few more times during that period, through our various mutual acquaintances, through vague and insincere apologies sent via email, and even through one laughably tone-deaf handwritten letter that claimed that he had somehow dramatically changed for the better and now realized the full extent of his mistakes. But I pointedly didn't respond to any of his feeble attempts to contact me. There was simply nothing of any true value left for us to say to each other. He had ultimately made his own poor choices in life, and now I had finally made the conscious decision to fully embrace mine. Every now and then I would still hear various random updates about his current life through the seemingly endless grapevine of mutual connections. He was reportedly struggling to find any meaningful employment, his professional reputation still badly tarnished by the public revelations of his fraud charges. He had also apparently moved all the way back in with his parents still stubbornly clinging to the naive belief that he would eventually be able to talk his way out of any situation if he simply turned on the full force of his artificial charm. But I truthfully didn't feel even the slightest bit of genuine sympathy for him. If anything, I just felt an immense sense of relief that he was no longer my personal problem to deal with. Almost exactly 1 month after everything in our divorce had been officially finalized, I stood thoughtfully by the window of my peaceful apartment, slowly sipping my morning coffee and quietly watching the city come to life below. The warm morning sunlight was streaming brightly into the living room, beautifully highlighting the fresh coat of colorful paint that I had carefully picked out for the space, my very favorite shade of calming, peaceful blue. The apartment no longer felt like a stressful battleground filled with negative emotions. It finally felt like a peaceful and comforting home. It was serene, completely mine, and filled with an endless array of exciting possibilities for the future. I thought briefly about the long and difficult journey that had ultimately brought me to this wonderful point in my life. For years I had earnestly believed in the sacred promise of marriage, in the beautiful idea of building a shared life with Leo that was filled with mutual respect and unconditional love. I had carelessly ignored the persistent little voice deep inside of me that constantly whispered that something just wasn't quite right in our relationship, that constantly warned me that his undeniable charm was actually just a skillfully crafted mask for deep-seated selfishness and rampant insecurity. But now I finally understood something incredibly important. Consciously walking away from a toxic and destructive relationship wasn't a sign of weakness or personal failure. It was actually a bold display of true inner strength and admirable self-awareness. Sophie and I consciously made an effort to meet for a relaxed weekend brunch every so often, a brand new ritual that we had both started since Leo's official exit from my life. Over mimosas and delicious waffles, she finally asked me the big question that I knew was coming. So what exciting things are actually next on the agenda for you, Clara? I smiled brightly, feeling a joyful mix of pure excitement and inner calm that had eluded me for far too long. Honestly, I'm currently just focusing my full attention completely on myself for a little while. My work is going incredibly well, and I've actually been seriously thinking about taking a longer solo vacation sometime very soon, possibly somewhere very quiet and peaceful near the mountains for a refreshing change of pace. She raised her wine glass high into the air. That's definitely exactly what I like to hear. You absolutely deserve all of the good things in the world, Clara. For the first time in many years, I felt fully confident that I was finally making deliberate decisions in my life, purely and solely for my own personal enjoyment and well-being. No more constant compromises, no more chronic second-guessing, just the incredible freedom to finally live my own life fully on my own terms. Occasionally, I would still receive minor updates about Leo's floundering life from the seemingly endless network of our mutual acquaintances. He was apparently struggling mightily to rebuild his completely shattered life, moving from one low-paying temporary job to the next, while desperately trying to somehow pay back the significant amount of money that he legally owed in restitution to me. The expensive designer suits and the luxurious international trips were clearly long gone from his life, permanently replaced by a harsh and unforgiving reality that he was completely unprepared to face. But I ultimately chose not to dwell on his dire circumstances. He had made his own poor choices in life, and I had consciously made the strong choice to finally move on from the entire messy situation. The last time that I actually ever heard from him directly was through one lengthy and rambling email message, a highly self-pitying apology that actually seemed far more motivated by his own lingering sense of selfishness than by any genuine remorse for his damaging actions. I barely read the first few lines of the message before mindlessly deleting the entire thing without even sending a quick reply. I honestly didn't need any kind of personal closure from him. I had finally found the strength and courage to fully accept everything that had happened and to move on completely with my own life. One peaceful evening, I sat comfortably out on the balcony of my apartment with a large glass of wine, quietly reflecting on all of the unbelievably difficult things that I had successfully been through over the past few years. The terrible betrayal, the intense heartbreak, the difficult and prolonged fight to reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. It had all ultimately led me to this incredibly beautiful moment in my life. And while everything certainly hadn't been quick or easy, it had undoubtedly been more than worth all of the immense pain and effort. I no longer felt nearly as angry or as bitter about everything that had happened between Leo and myself. If anything, I actually felt truly grateful for everything that had happened. Leo's shocking betrayal had ultimately forced me to fully confront my own inner strength and resilience, to finally stop compromising my own happiness, and to start truly prioritizing my own well-being and peace of mind. I had finally learned to fully trust my own well-honed instincts, to highly value my hard-earned independence, and to never again allow someone else to carelessly take the reins of my own precious life. As the bright city lights flickered dramatically in the far distance, I quietly raised my wine glass to the dark night sky. "Here's to me," I said under my breath. "Here's to exciting new beginnings and completely starting over from scratch." And with that simple declaration, I finally and completely closed the difficult chapter on Leo for good, ready to fully embrace whatever exciting opportunities that the future might soon bring my way.